Imagine waking up tomorrow to discover that the world's most powerful civilizations had disappeared, not after centuries of decline, not because of one unstoppable conqueror, but within the span of a single lifetime. Around 1200 BC, something extraordinary happened. Across the eastern Mediterranean, great kingdoms collapsed, cities burned, trade routes vanished, entire writing systems disappeared from everyday life. It was one of the greatest disruptions in human history. More than 3,000 years later, historians are still trying to answer one question: what caused the Bronze Age collapse? At its height, the Bronze Age was unlike anything the world had ever seen. Great kingdoms stretched across the eastern Mediterranean, connected by vast trade networks that carried copper, tin, gold, ivory, grain, and luxury goods across thousands of miles. Egypt ruled from the Nile. The Hittite Empire dominated Anatolia. The Mycenaeans controlled mainland Greece. Powerful cities such as Ugarit, Byblos, and Megiddo flourished as merchants, diplomats, and armies moved freely between civilizations. For centuries, this interconnected world created immense wealth, technological innovation, and relative stability. Then, almost without warning, it all came crashing down. Archaeologists have uncovered the same disturbing pattern across dozens of ancient cities: thick layers of ash, collapsed palace walls, abandoned homes, weapons left behind, and something perhaps even more unsettling: silence. Cities that had thrived for centuries were suddenly empty. Trade records stopped. Royal archives ended. Entire governments simply vanished from history. In some places, civilization would not recover for hundreds of years. The evidence was buried beneath the earth, waiting more than 3,000 years to be discovered. So, what actually caused one of the greatest collapses in human history? For decades, historians searched for a single answer: an invading army, a devastating earthquake, a prolonged drought, famine, disease, civil war. Each theory explained part of the mystery, but none could explain everything. Today, most researchers believe the Bronze Age collapse was not caused by one disaster. It was caused by many. Like dominoes falling, one crisis triggered another until an entire interconnected world could no longer survive. To understand what happened, we have to investigate each piece of the puzzle. The first, and perhaps most famous theory, centers on a mysterious group known only as the Sea Peoples. We don't know exactly who they were, we don't know where they came from, and we still debate why they suddenly appeared across the eastern Mediterranean. Ancient Egyptian inscriptions describe waves of foreign warriors arriving by both land and sea. They attacked powerful kingdoms that had stood for centuries. Some cities were burned to the ground, others disappeared forever. For generations, historians believed the Sea Peoples were responsible for the collapse of the Bronze Age. But modern archaeology tells a more complicated story. Were they the cause, or simply another victim of a civilization already beginning to fall apart? Another theory points not to invading armies, but to the sky itself. Around the time of the Bronze Age collapse, parts of the eastern Mediterranean experienced decades of severe drought. Rainfall declined, harvests failed, rivers shrank. Entire farming communities struggled to survive. Modern scientists have analyzed ancient pollen, cave formations, and lake sediments to reconstruct the climate of more than 3,000 years ago. Their findings suggest that many regions entered one of the most difficult environmental periods in centuries for civilizations built upon agriculture. Even a few years of poor harvests could trigger famine, migration, political instability, and conflict. But drought alone still cannot explain why so many powerful kingdoms collapsed almost simultaneously. It was another piece of the puzzle, not the entire picture. If drought weakened kingdoms and invasions attacked their borders, another force may have pushed them even closer to collapse. Earthquakes. The eastern Mediterranean lies on one of the world's most active seismic zones. Archaeologists have discovered evidence that many Bronze Age cities suffered repeated earthquake damage. Massive stone walls collapsed, palaces crumbled, roads and fortifications became unusable. For civilizations already struggling with famine, migration, and war, rebuilding after one devastating earthquake would have been difficult. Rebuilding after several may have been impossible. But even earthquakes alone cannot explain why nearly every major civilization collapsed within such a short period. Once again, another piece of the puzzle falls into place. Today, many historians believe the Bronze Age collapse was not caused by a single event. Instead, it was the failure of an entire interconnected system. Every great civilization depended on another. Tin arrived from distant lands, copper crossed the sea, grain fed growing cities. Merchants carried not only goods but information, diplomacy, and stability. When one kingdom faltered, its neighbors absorbed the shock. But eventually, too many systems failed at once. Trade collapsed. Governments lost control. Food became scarce. Armies could no longer be supplied. Within only a few decades, one of history's greatest civilizations unraveled. More than 3,000 years have passed since the Bronze Age collapse, yet its story feels surprisingly familiar. A world connected by trade, nations dependent upon one another, complex supply chains, political instability, climate stress, migration, conflict. The people of the Bronze Age never imagined their civilization could disappear. History reminds us that no civilization is permanent. Strength can become fragility. Prosperity can become dependence. And systems that appear unbreakable can fail far faster than anyone expects. The Bronze Age collapse remains one of history's greatest mysteries, not because we lack evidence, but because its lessons continue to challenge us today. If history has taught us anything, it's that understanding the past may be the best way to prepare for the future. This has been Mystery in History. Thank you for watching.